Hi, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jasmine Jones. I'm 15 years old. My birthday is 2004, and I'm going to the 11th grade.
Sure. My name is Dorothy Jean Daniels. I am 56 years old. My birthday, 1963. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and my profession is I am an attorney.
I'm David Herbert Daniels Jr. I was born in 1941. I'm a retired physician.
If you want to talk about disadvantages for African Americans in the United States, you have to look at the historical perspective. So coming to this country as slaves, and then with the Emancipation Proclamation, having some measure of freedom, but really freedom but no help, and then going through the era of the Jim Crow South, which was still in full force and effect when I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I know my parents certainly experienced it, as well as grandparents. So yes, even today, the African American community still feels the effects of historic racism, historic discrimination. It's unrealistic to think that the repercussions of that racism and slavery and segregation don't continue to ripple through our society.
Yeah, I think there's always some intrinsic disadvantages, but you have to accept that and just move on and do the best you can.
Yeah, I feel like overall, yes. I feel like a lot of things depend on the situation, but when it comes to certain people who have a certain mindset, you can't do anything about them or their way of thinking. So in that way, a lot of African American people are at a disadvantage.
So I was born in 1963 in Little Rock, Arkansas, like I said, and that was certainly the segregated South, but I was a baby, so I was not necessarily aware of it, of course, but I know that I was born in a segregated hospital, so certainly experienced segregation at birth. I was born at St. Vincent's Infirmary in Little Rock, Arkansas.
I grew up in a segregated environment. Went to a segregated school when I was growing up. It was a way of life back then. You really didn't give much thought to it at that time.
So in terms of myself and experiencing segregation as an older person, so I wouldn't really call it segregation, I would call it integration, because the memories that I have going to elementary school, junior high, and high school, they were not, it was not segregation per se. It wasn't that there was a school for black kids and a school for white kids. So, in the community we were living in Rancho Cucamonga, then yes, anybody who was a resident of that community would go to the elementary school, the middle school, the high school, but I was the one of either the only or one of a handful of black students in my school. So I can say that I did integrate 3 separate schools.
Racism is a way of life even now. It was more blatant back then.
Definitely at school. I know that people aren't being, sometimes I know people aren't being serious, sometimes I know people are being serious, sometimes I know people are purposely trying to make me feel uncomfortable. So for example, this one kid in 7th grade in my math class, he was on some website just reading racist joke after racist joke, and I was the only non-white person at the whole entire table, so I felt really attacked and I asked him to stop. And then it just blew up into this whole thing it didn't need to be. So, yeah, definitely instances like that. There's also other instances where people who aren't black are just saying the N-word to for example, to their Mexican friends or to their white friend. And I know they're not personally attacking me or they're not trying to be hurtful to the black community. It's just that they feel that saying and doing stuff like that is okay, even though in my eyes it's not.
Certainly a lot of examples of racism. One example that I think is kind of glaring to me was when I was just practicing law. So I was a young lawyer, and I was actually, working really hard. I was, moving up the ranks in terms of my office. I was given a murder case to try, so I was in the middle of a murder trial. You always want to look your best. You always want to put your best foot forward. And so I remember putting on, one of my best suits, and I was in trial, and I selected the jury, and we were about to start with opening statements, and the judge decided to call a recess. And so during the recess, I decided I would go to the ladies' room, and in order to avoid my jurors, I went down to the second floor of the courthouse to use the restroom there. So as I went to the second floor ladies' room, I saw there was a line of 2 or 3 women that were standing outside of the bathroom. So I just walked up and I, kind of got in line. I was kind of in the entryway of the bathroom, and I could see that the toilet in the bathroom was overflowing. It was malfunctioning, it was overflowing, so women were just kind of standing there not knowing what to do. So as I approached the bathroom, one of the ladies, it was a white woman, she was waiting in line for the bathroom, and she turned around and she looked at me and she said, "Oh, are you here to clean it up?" And I was stunned. I mean, she, obviously did not see me. She didn't see me as an attorney. She didn't see me as someone who was in the middle of a murder trial. She didn't see the expensive suit from Nordstrom that I was wearing. She didn't see the pearls that my mother gave me. All that she saw was a black face, and she assumed that I was there to clean a toilet.
Yeah, my classroom was, I think, average size. I don't remember the number, but just thinking about it, I think there were probably 20 to 30 students in each class, probably a little bit less. Of course, they were all black teachers, and they treated us well. They tried to do the best they could, and my mother would stay quite involved with the teachers, and I had a very pleasant time. During my senior year, all the schools were closed to avoid integration, so I had to go to a different city to finish high school. The school was J.C. Cook High School in Riceville, Arkansas, and I rode there in the back of a truck. I remember it was very cold back then. It's a usual school environment. It was all segregated, so there was no interaction with white people when I was growing up at that time. So it was just, I think it was a typical school environment.
Being the only African American student in elementary school, for the most part in elementary school, middle school, and high school, it was rather isolating, just socially isolating, being different. Got a little better in high school because at least there were enough black students to form a black student union. But, because my parents are both educated and value education, education was a priority in the house, and so we were rewarded for good grades. I remember my dad would give us maybe $5 or $10 for an A. I think it was $10 for an A, $5 for a B, and so forth. So we were encouraged to take education seriously, and there was always an expectation that we would go to college. I mean, it just wasn't really discussed. I mean, I think that it was just maybe ingrained from a very early age that we were going to be an educated family. So all 5 of us went to college, and some of us went to graduate school. We went to a community college first that was essentially in our backyard, Chaffee Community College. Went there for 2 years, and then we all transitioned to 4-year institutions. There was a financial issue after I was done with community college. And so I decided to go into the military to help fund the balance of my undergraduate education. So I was in the Army for 3 years and earned money to pay for school, and then came out and graduated from UC Riverside, and then went to University of San Diego School of Law. So again, going to law school was kind of flashback to my younger years, my younger elementary schools, because it was a very different environment, not very racially balanced, very few black students. And at University of San Diego School of Law, it was, it's a private Catholic school, it's expensive, and so for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by what I would call white privilege, extreme white privilege. I was not used to going to school with students who had gone to private schools all their lives and didn't have to worry about student loans to pay for their law school education. They were driving, Mercedes and BMWs, and I had a raggedy, Mercury Lynx and then a Toyota Corolla or Toyota Celica. So that was culture shock. Very different experience, but I'm glad I did it. I'm glad that I was able to find my way through that environment, socially and academically, and come out on the other side of it with a degree.
My mom always encouraged education and doing well in school. In middle school, I really started getting good grades. My mom encouraged me to get good grades. I wanted to get good grades, and it wasn't really difficult or super hard for me to get good grades, and I had good teachers. Albert Einstein, I was like one of three black girls, and that was basically all white school. I hadn't really been exposed to black kids besides that. And then going to Roosevelt, there was a lot of black kids. I was in some gate and seminar classes, especially in 7th and 8th grade, but I just really noticed how in my seminar classes, there was just one other black boy. Everyone else was white, and those are the people I had all 6 and 7 of my classes with, so those were the people I was usually befriending and being around and hanging out with. So even in that way, I was kind of separated from the other black people. This one kid, even in my yearbook, he obviously noticed that we were the only 2 black kids in the whole class, or within that whole just kind of series of classes that we took, and it was like, thanks for being the only other black kid in the class. I was like, okay. Like, it's true.
I'm most proud of my legal degree. I decided when I was going to community college that I wanted to be a lawyer, and that was a long road ahead, but I was offered a scholarship at University of San Diego. I came down here not knowing a whole lot about the city, not really knowing anyone except for my aunt and uncle, and I just had to figure it out, and again, I was going to school with peers that were whose lifestyles were very different from mine. Law school was not easy. It was not easy. I had to work very hard for my grades, very hard on papers that I did. And so, yeah, I would consider that one of my greatest accomplishments, that I graduated from law school.
Finishing medical school, it's something I really wanted to do, and it was very difficult. It was a very hard program. So that was a big accomplishment, and I'm very proud of that. I think the greatest concern is that it was so lonely because everyone knew each other. Before I started medical school, I had never gone to school with anyone white. I didn't have any white peers. So that was a major adjustment. It was somewhat lonely, difficult, but I persevered and made it. After I decided to become a doctor, then I worked very hard to qualify to get into medical school, and then I applied to the University of Arkansas and was accepted. I'd always heard it was very difficult to get in. The rumor was that there were hundreds of people who applied, and they only let in less than 100. Most of the people who applied didn't get in, so that was a big concern. And so I was very happy when I was accepted. They required you to pay your tuition in full when you get in, and my dad was able to get the money for me and get the initial tuition. He pawned his car actually to get the money he needed for my tuition.
My greatest inspiration, hard to say. I mean, I had a few. My parents, of course. I mean, I saw my dad being a very dedicated and hardworking doctor. My mother, very dedicated to her family, and really, sacrificed a lot, for the 5 kids. I think that, during a different time, she probably really could have done so much more with her life. My mother's a very creative woman, excellent seamstress, very creative, very crafty. In fact, this is one of my prized possessions. It's a baby blanket that she made for me. It just brings back a lot of really good memories. My grandmother, she lived to be 94 years old. She was my greatest inspiration in terms of just heart and soul. I consider her really the emotional, I felt like she was the emotional backbone of our family. Very loving, very positive woman.
I made this trinket tray, heart trinket tray, where I store some of my earrings. I made these concert bags for Jada and I painted this bag for Jada for her birthday.
Who's Jada?
My sister. I painted that butterfly, painted that butterfly. And some other resin crafts that are still in the process of being made. I need to touch up on them. Do some other stuff. I made these hearts, but I still need to make the keychains. My mom is my greatest inspiration because she's just really inspiring how she always keeps moving and she's always able to get done what she needs to get done. And even though she has a lot to do and she has a lot on her plate, she allows me and my sister to do and try things that we want to do and just sometimes take us places where we want to go, even though we know she's really busy. She makes time for us. She makes time to come watch our school performances, makes time to come watch us at award ceremonies. So that means a lot to me, and it's really inspiring how she just can always make a way no matter how difficult the situation is.
Looking back, I realized he was a greater inspiration than I realized when I was growing up. He was very strict, insisted on hard work. So during that time, it was difficult. But as I look back, I think he was my greatest inspiration. When I finished medical school, my father died 6 months before graduation. That was a great disappointment. I adjusted well. I thought more about it later on than I did at the time.
I was really disappointed after I finished community college and I couldn't go straight to a four-year college. I was really looking forward to having the quote-unquote college experience. Wanted to live in dorms, wanted to, be on a campus with other kids my age. And financially, that just wasn't possible for me to do. So I ended up going into the military, into the Army for 3 years, and that was one of the more difficult parts of my life. It was a tough 3 years, it really was.
I feel disappointed that I haven't got my business started. I'm usually quick to do things that I want to do, and this is probably the one thing I've wanted to do that I've been, and even I feel like with projects, I'm just not good at. I always get them done at the end of the day, but I don't really like how much. I know time is required for it though, so I'm disappointed in myself, but I know that I also shouldn't be disappointed, so at the same time I'm not disappointed, but there's still a slight feeling of disappointment. So for example, my Girl Scout project, I wanted to have it done freshman year. I'm going into my junior year. I still don't have a project idea, a concrete project idea, so I feel disappointed in myself that I haven't been able to just get to that point yet, but I know it's a process, and I know at the end of the day I'm going to get it done either way, so.
What are your thoughts about the current Black Lives Matter movement?
So, the Black Lives Matter movement, I think that it is, I'm glad that there is this awakening, this kind of, new awakening to civil rights movement, to a civil rights movement and to Black Lives Matter. I think that it's something that is important to our society as Americans. I do support the Black Lives Matter movement, but I would like to see the movement more focused. That's what's kind of missing for me, in the movement? You know, is the movement focused on defunding the police? Is the movement focused on early childhood education? Is the focus on, you know, cutting the pipeline of, you know, the public school to prison pipeline? Is it focused on, you know, law enforcement and justice reform? And so I think that because there's this window where, you know, there's this confusion going on in terms of defining the mission of Black Lives Matter. I mean, that's what I think needs to happen. I think that the energy that's going into it is fantastic. It's needed. It's relevant. But I believe the mission statement and the focus needs to be more clear to all Americans in terms of what it is. What is the objective of the movement? And maybe it's all those things. Maybe it's everything I just said.
It reminds me of the Freedom Riders and the sit-in demonstrations when I was when I was in college, and everything is very similar. It's brought back a lot of memories. I didn't participate. I spent my time studying and working, but I really appreciate the sacrifices that the people made who participated. Many of my friends didn't finish college, I think, primarily because of that participation.
I think it's good. I think it's good people are actually talking about this, even though it's no new issue. Like, it's really interesting and surprising how something like this just completely blew up. But I understand why, based off of the circumstances of this specific situation with George Floyd. So.
And the final question is, what does perseverance mean to you?
It means keep moving forward. It means not giving up. It means trying everything, trying different situations, seeking out resources and help from different people, doing anything possible, anything you can do to keep moving forward and to be who you want to be, to do what you want to do. In a lot of situations, you got to prove yourself because you're not going to be seen as equal. People aren't gonna. Sometimes you just have to prove to other people, like, I can do this just like they can do that. Just because I'm Black doesn't mean I can do that. Just because I'm Black doesn't mean I can't get good grades. Just because I'm Black doesn't mean I'm ghetto. It's just like all of those things. You have to persevere through those stereotypes and just always try to do your best and show truly who you are and not let anyone's mindset of who you may be dictate who you actually are.
I believe perseverance to me means you set a goal, work very, very hard to meet those goals, and continue until you achieve it.
To me, perseverance is getting right back up when you've been knocked down. It is never taking no for an answer. It is continuing to reach higher in spite of the obstacles that we engage, you know, that we have in front of us every single day. It's the ability and the commitment to keep going forward. I mean, that's what happened during, you know, the civil rights movement in the 60s. You know, there's plenty of footage about lunch counter protests, water hoses, dogs. You know, people have to we have to keep going in spite of, you know, the law may not be on our side, your boss may not be on your side, you might be discriminated against, you're going to experience racism. You cannot let that be an excuse. You cannot let that stop you from moving forward in your life and striving for the best life that you can possibly have, and for giving and for, you know, helping other people. You have to keep moving forward.